Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you had an enjoyable Lag BaOmer. And just bang myself out. Hope you had an enjoyable Lag BaOmer. I hope you enjoyed the takeout that we all did as a shul today. And this week's Parsha is Behar-Bechukotai, Tavshin Pei. Our learning should be a schus merit for refuah shalema for all those who are ill, that we quickly be rescued from this very difficult situation that we find ourselves in now. Today being Lag BaOmer, I'd like to start with a thought on Lag BaOmer, and that is that Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer. And we know that we treat it as a holiday. We don't say Tachanun today. What is the joy of Lag BaOmer? So one explanation that's given is that during the Omer, we observe Avelis mourning over the death of the 24,000 students of the sage Rabbi Akiva. And according to some opinions, and we know that they died over a 33-day period between Pesach and Shavuos. According to some, they died during the first 33 days, starting from the second day of Pesach. According to others, it was 33 days throughout. The 33rd day of the Omer was the day that they stopped dying, or after 33 days of death, there was no more dying, and therefore the 33rd day of the Omer was chosen to be the day to remember this. That this was the day that at this point, after 33 days, they stopped dying. And that is how the commentaries explain why we treat it as a holiday. Now, the question that's asked by the Pri Chadash, one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch of the Code of Jewish Law, is how should we understand this joy, the joy of this day? If the joy is because they stopped dying at 33 days, what's the joy? There was no one left. Everybody died. All the 24,000 students died. And we're told that Rabbi Akiva, after all of them died, left where he was in the north of Israel, went to the south, and found 5 new students to which he taught the Torah, and they passed on the Torah to the rest of the Jewish people. The Gemara says, actually the Medrash says, that after the 24,000 students died, land of Israel was desolate. It was destroyed. It was spiritually destroyed. The continuity of Torah Shalapah, the oral law that was to go from Rabbi Akiva to his students, to these 24,000 students, it was over. It was done. You had to find new students to teach the oral law to, and it was through them that the oral law continued in the Jewish people. But if the point is that at 33 days they stopped dying, what's the joy? There was no one left. They all died. So the Pri Chadash suggests that what we're really rejoicing on Lag BaOmer is not that they stopped dying, but that no more students Rabbi Akiva died. As we said, Rabbi Akiva found 5 new students, and they didn't die like their predecessors. The Talmud says that the reason why the 24,000 students Rabbi Akiva died was because they did not act honorably with each other. And that's a separate discussion on its own, why that would make them be deserving of death. But that's what the Talmud says. And these 5 students who continued after Rabbi Akiva, they survived. They didn't die. They learned the lesson from what happened to their predecessors. They acted honorably with each other, and because of that, they lived, and they were able to continue passing on the oral law. So the joy of Lag BaOmer is that when we say the students stopped dying, it means no more students died. Rabbi Akiva lost his 24,000 students, but after that, no more students died. Those 5 new students were able to carry on. They survived, they carried on, and they continued Torah in the Jewish people. So our joy is the fact that Hashem gave us another chance. He gave Rabbi Akiva another chance for Torah to be able to continue amongst the Jewish people. Now again, we observe the mourning. We observe the loss of the 24,000 students, because 24,000 students passing on the oral law would have been much different than only 5. But 5 were enough to be able to pass on the oral law at a level that there could be a continuity of studying the oral law within the Jewish people. And that's what we're celebrating. The fact that Torah found a new place, it started anew, and was able to continue until this day. That's how the Pri Chodesh understands. Now, that's one aspect of the joy of Lag BaOmer. Another aspect is the fact that it is the yahrzeit of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Shimon Bar Yochai was a Tana sage of the Mishnah. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was the author of the Zohar, the basis for Kabbalah. And on the day that he died was the day that he revealed much of the secrets and basis of and the teachings of Kabbalah to his students to pass on. And actually, the day that he died is when he revealed it's when he revealed all these very sublime and what we call secret aspects of a dimension of the Torah called Kabbalah. He revealed this primarily on the day of his death, on his yahrzeit, and his yahrzeit is on Lag BaOmer. And he told the students every Lag BaOmer to rejoice, because that was the day that he had the greatest effect, the greatest influence on the Jewish people through his teaching of Torah, through his teaching of the Kabbalah. So Lag BaOmer is a joyous day. It's not just according to the first reason we gave, there's a certain joy to it. We don't say tachnun. We suspend the practice of the mourning over the students, but the kind of high level of joy that we have on Lag BaOmer, that relates more to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Again, it's his yahrzeit, and it's not a celebration of his yahrzeit as much as what he did on that day that he passed on, which is when he revealed when he spent so much of that final day revealing of the secrets of Kabbalah to his students to pass on to those who would further study it. So it's interesting. It comes out that on the day that we celebrate the fact that no more students passed away is the same day that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of those 5 students Rabbi Akiva taught anew in the South, revealed Kabbalah, which means that as we celebrate the fact that there was no more students dying, we not only were able to have a continuity of the Torah, but we actually had a flourishing of the Torah we didn't have before. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, until he revealed the secrets of Kabbalah, this was not something that was well known. It became more well known and revealed because he revealed it now. It's not like it didn't exist, but it was really kept under lid. It was something that he now revealed more for more people to study from. Actually, the revelation of Kabbalah and the spread of Kabbalah, when studied properly, are the seeds of Mashiach. So we have, on the same day that we celebrate the rebuilding of Torah, we celebrate a flourishing of Torah. And that flourishing came about actually after all the 24,000 students died, and the 5 new students were taught, and one of them was Reb Bar Yochai, and he revealed the secret, the hidden Torah, and it comes out that through the death of the 24,000 students, and now the raising of 5 new students, that now there was this flourishing of Torah, the revelation of Kabbalah. It's very interesting. We have a destruction, and out of destruction comes a flourishing of Torah. We have a destruction of Torah, a loss of Torah, with the 24,000 students, and then we have a flourishing of Torah that comes up after that from those who rebuilt. And I think there's a very interesting lesson here, and that is that the merit to be able to have this flourishing of Torah, this new revelation of Torah, of Kabbalah, came about in merit of rebuilding Torah. It was not easy for these 5 students to be able, 5 students under the tutelage of Rabbi Akiva, to now bring back Torah Sheba'al Peh in a way that it can continue amongst the Jewish people. There were 24,000 before. Now you're left with 5. And as we said, there's a difference. But again, the 5 had to start anew. There was a destruction. There was a loss of Torah. And the Torah had to now be rebuilt with these 5 people in a way that it can have a continuity with for the Jewish people. That was a great act. It was a great accomplishment in light of the fact that it came after such a destruction. And in merit of rebuilding after destruction, they didn't just have the merit to rebuild, they were given the merit to actually flourish, to bring about something new in Torah. Because when we rebuild after destruction, and we live up to that challenge of rebuilding after destruction, not only do we merit to rebuild, we should actually merit to flourish in a way that we didn't have before. And that's the joy of Lag BaOmer. The rebuilding of Torah, and then in merit of the rebuilding, the flourishing of Torah. Okay, next thing I want to talk about relates to what we did today on Lag BaOmer, which is that we joined together with other shuls to patronize Jewish establishments, Jewish eating establishments, to help them in this very serious time when they've lost a lot of business due to the COVID-19, and to support them, there was a idea amongst different shuls to show them support. Everybody should go and buy from them to support them in their time of need. Everybody was asked to support a Jewish establishment, to support one of a few Jewish establishments. So in this week's Parsha, we have an interesting discussion about supporting Jewish establishments. The pasuk reads in this week's Parsha, in the first Parsha, Parshas Behar, where the Torah talks about, the Torah actually in Parshas Behar begins talking about the mitzvah of Shemitah, where every 7th year we leave the land of Israel fallow, we don't work the land. And after 7 cycles, after 49 years, we have a 50th year, the Jubilee year. And the 49th year is a Shemitah year, and the 50th year is a Shemitah year. What is unique about the 50th year is that in the 50th year, the shofar is blown on Yom Kippur, and with that, 2 things happen. What's called an Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave, an indentured servant, automatically goes free. The amount of automatic years of servitude of a Jewish servant, of an Eved Ivri, is a minimum of 6 years. If he wants to stay after 6 years, he goes through a process called Ritzia, and he stays until Yovel, which could be a number of years. If Yovel comes in the middle of his 6 years, he also goes free. So Yovel frees an indentured Jewish slave, or a Jewish slave, or a Jewish maidservant. Another thing that happens in Yovel is that if there was a piece of land that was part of a family, when Joshua entered Eretz Yisrael, then was divided up amongst the Jewish people. People received land, and that land is meant to stay within that family. Now, let's say a certain piece of land belonged to a family, was part of their heritage, and due to certain circumstances, they have to sell the land to someone. So the halacha is, depending on different details, that when Yovel comes, the land reverts back to its original owner. Those are the 2 things that happen during Yovel. The land goes back to the original owner, and all indentured Jewish servants go free. And the Torah says that based on the fact that when Yovel comes, a piece of land goes back to its original owner, it comes out then that if you sell a piece of land to someone, you've got to figure out how many years are there until Yovel makes it go back. You have to charge the person pays based on how many years he's going to have it. And when the Torah tells us that, the Torah tells us, if you sell something to your friend or buy something from your friend, a person should not cheat his brother. The Torah continues, based on the amount of years that are left, based on the amount of years that the person will actually be able to hold on to the land, that's how much he pays for it. Rashi points out that from the fact that the Torah says, if you buy something from your friend or you sell something to your friend, that the Torah is alluding to something else. And Rashi cites the Sifra, the Medrash Sifra, that says, V'yesh oid rasha, There's another meaning that lies here in these words. If when you buy something from your friend, when you sell something to your friend or buy something from your friend. How do you know that when you sell something, sell it to a fellow Jew? The Torah says when you sell something, sell it to your friend. When you sell something, it should go to your friend, to your fellow Jew. And how do you know that you come to buy something, buy it from your Jewish friend? Or you're buying from the hand of your friend. When you're buying, it should be from the hand of your friend, which means you have a choice of patronizing a fellow Jew or a non-Jew. You should be patronizing your fellow Jew. If you could buy from a fellow Jew over a non-Jew, you should patronize him. If it's a question of selling something to a non-Jew or to a Jew, sell it to the Jew. That is what the Torah, that Safra tells us, the Torah is also teaching us here. That when doing business, you should do business with a Jew, support a fellow Jew. So there are a number of interesting details to this mitzvah. Now, I want to share with you how Rabbi Daniel Neustadt lays out the details of this halacha, this law. The first thing is that, unlike many other laws, Rambam, Maimonides, and the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, do not cite this, which would imply that it's not an obligation. Nonetheless, the Chafetz Chaim, in his Sefer Avos Chesed, does cite this. It's brought down in other sources also, which means it is an appropriate thing to do. And we're going to see that this whole idea of supporting a Jew over a non-Jew is going to revolve around how much of a difference is there between the two. So for instance, if let's say it's a question of going to a Jewish store that's a little farther away than the non-Jewish store. So it may take longer to shop. However, it's a little farther away. It's not very far away. It's a bit further away, which means it'll take a little bit more time and effort to give it to buy from him. Again, if it is a bit farther away, then the mitzvah is to give preference to the Jewish-owned store. Okay, so we have a question here. If the Jewish store is further away than the non-Jewish store, you should still patronize the Jewish store if it's a little further, even though it's a little further away. Okay. Now, what if there's a difference in price? What if the Jewish store is charging more than the non-Jewish store? There again, it's brought down. The commentaries say that it depends. If the Jew is charging a little more, it's appropriate to support the Jewish person. If he's charging a lot more, then you don't have to. Then there's no mitzvah. And how much is much higher and how much is a little higher, that we don't have any kind of precise definition. And it may therefore really be up to each individual to decide for themselves what's called a little more and what's called a lot more. Okay, now, when we talk about that, when it's going to be a lot more to buy from the Jew than from the non-Jew, that we say there's no more mitzvah to buy from the Jew, it doesn't mean per item. You check this store, they sell this much, the Jewish store sells it for this much, and the non-Jewish store sells it for that much. It's not about the price of each item. Basically, it's about the total outlay of money you're going to have to do. If you're going shopping, and basically at the end of the day, you'll have to be spending more money in the Jewish store than the non-Jewish store, then there's no mitzvah to have to go to the Jewish store. The same thing applies. And again, if it's going to be a slight difference, you should support the Jewish store. If it's going to be a bigger difference, then if it's going to be considered a significant difference, then there is no mitzvah to support the Jewish store. What about if it's a difference in quality or service? It's the same idea. If the difference in quality and service is it's a big difference, There's no mitzvah to patronize a Jewish store. If it is, again, a slight difference, then again, the mitzvah is to support your fellow Jew. And one last thing that I'm going to mention is that this whole idea of giving a Jewish business preference is talking about retail and not the wholesale. Basically, when you're selling to the customer who's going to use it, that is where we say that there is a preference to buying or selling with a fellow Jew. When we're talking about wholesale, then there's no difference. The mitzvah there does not apply. So these are a couple of these are some of the details involved in it, or the main details that are involved in this concept that we have in Rashi, this week's Parsha, about supporting a fellow Jew, doing business with a fellow Jew. Okay. Now, I mentioned before that during Yovel, that's a time where the Jewish slaves are set free. Even though, which again, I mentioned, either it could be within the first 6 years, which means they didn't fill their quota, so to speak, or even though they may have gone past the 6 years because they wanted to, after Yovel, it's over. Now, Yovel, the shofar, as I mentioned before, the Torah tells us to blow the shofar during the Yovel year on Yom Kippur. But the year we know starts with Rosh Hashanah. And the Rambam brings down, this is halacha, sourced from the Talmud, that although the Jewish slave actually was free on Yom Kippur, starting from Rosh Hashanah, he couldn't leave his master's house and go home, but he stops working. And as the Rambam writes, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, they couldn't go home, but nor were they enslaved anymore to their master. The servants eat and drink and rejoice, which means until now, room and board was because they were working. They were servants to the master. They're not doing any more work, but he still has to feed them, give them to eat, give them to drink, and allow them to rejoice, allow them to rejoice over the coming freedom that they're going to experience. So they don't just leave, you don't just push them out, they stay. And while they're staying, you're going to feed them, you're going to drink them, you're going to give them to drink, you're going to treat them well, you're going to make them enjoy, you're going to give them a chance to enjoy themselves before they leave. Once Yom Kippur comes, the shofar is blown, and the servants go back home. What's going on here? What is the point here of having them still remain with the master, but not have to work for him? What's the point of it? So it's a very interesting explanation. And that actually there's something here both for the former slave and for the former master. The servant, before he goes back into society, he's got to regain his self-esteem. Until now, he really, again, there's a difference between a Jewish servant and a non-Jewish servant. You can work a non-Jewish slave harder than a Jewish slave, but it's not like the Jewish slave is sitting around doing nothing. The Jewish slave has his obligations. He is forced to work. And not only that, the master can make him produce more slaves, which means the master can set him up with a non-Jewish maidservant. It's permitted for him to have children with her. And halachically, the children from a maidservant have the status of non-Jewish slaves, and they belong to the master. So actually, the master can make him do something that really is not appropriate for a Jewish man to do. But as a slave, one of the obligations are make more slaves. Clearly, that's not the greatest spiritual experience in the sense of spiritual growth that a person can have. So number one, he's not free to do his own. He's not free. He's not even free in certain ways to live a full Jewish life if the master wants him to produce slaves. And now he's going to become a free man. He's going to return to society. He's going to now be fully responsible or I mean, he always had mitzvahs he had to do, but now there's no more of that other stuff. He's got to live like a regular Jew in a Jewish society. And that's not so easy to jump back into. To go from the servitude straight into freedom, it's too extreme. There needs to be a bridge in between. There needs to be a point in between where the slave can get it into his head, can internalize and appreciate and build himself back up before he goes back into society, living like everybody else. And the way that he builds up that self-esteem is that the master gives him to eat, gives him to drink, lets him have a good time, and then he goes back. Because the master needs to help the servant gain his self-esteem, that he is a free man, and that he has it within his power to get back into society and live a Jewish life like everybody does, or call it a full Jewish life like everybody did, and take on to the responsibilities of taking care of himself instead of being a servant. This is something that can be difficult to get used to. So instead of jumping right back into society, we give him a break, we give him a bridge, give him a chance to feel that he's important. Because look, no work, he's getting his drink, he's getting food, he's getting drink, he's enjoying himself. He's being built up to internalize and to accept the fact that he has value, that he has worth, and that he can go back into society and function properly like everybody else. So there's something here for the servant. There's also something here for the master. It is very difficult to give up a slave. He could have been living with you for many, many years, depending on if let's say he, after 6 years, decided to stay along, and there's another 40 or more years left to Yovel, he's going to be there for a long time. And it's not easy to give him up. And actually, we find that there were parts of Jewish history where they weren't doing it. They weren't letting it happen. They weren't letting the slaves go free. But it's not easy. And when the master allows this person to leave, in his mind, that's my former slave. He doesn't respect him. He just looks at him like a slave. Okay, now I can't make him work, but that was my slave. You have to learn to respect this person. And you're going to learn to respect him by wining and dining him. The same person at one point of time had to do what you told him, and that's how he got fed. Now, without doing any work, you're going to wine him, you're going to dine him. You're going to now do actions that make you understand that this person is a respectable person, and you need to respect him. And he's no more your former slave. He is a full-fledged member of the Jewish community. And we can take it another step further. Sefer Chinuch tells us that the purpose of the mitzvah of Yovel is for people to understand that nothing belongs to them. You may have bought a piece of land, you may have bought a servant, you may have had him for a long time, but guess what? There's a point of time where the true owner of everything, the Rebbeinu Shalom, says, you can't have him anymore. You got to give him away. But he's mine. No, he's not yours. He's God's. Everything belongs to Hashem. And if Hashem is one who decides you'll have something, and he decides when you won't have something. And that's a lesson that the people who now give up their slaves have to internalize. They have to internalize that they don't own anything. They have to internalize that nothing is permanent when in the perspective of our relationship to Hashem. Amongst each other, we have ownership. But when it comes to the real ownership of the world, that's Hashem's ownership. We don't have any ownership, and we don't have anything forever. Everything is temporary, nothing is guaranteed. And not only is it a question of what we owned and what we had being told us that we don't own it, it's about our status also. I was the master, he was the servant. And we're being told now, you're not a master anymore. Not only that, Forget about it. You're just not his master. You are going to wine and dine him. He's not going to work for you, and you're going to feed him and give him to drink. You're going to make him rejoice. You're going to serve him. It's almost like the tables have turned. You were the master, and you're not the master anymore. You're serving him. And that was also part of the lesson of understanding that our status is also not something that we own. It's also something that's on loan to us by Hashem. And when he wants us to have it, we have it. If he wants to take it away, he'll take it away. There's nothing permanent. There's nothing guaranteed. There's nothing that we own. And whether it be the material items that we own, whether it be the status that we have. And the way that the master internalizes this is by the fact that now this person who used to be his slave, he's serving him. He's giving him food and drink, and the person's not working, he's not paying, you're serving him. Those actions help you internalize the lesson of Yovel. It helps the master internalize the lesson of Yovel, that there's nothing that we actually own, whether it be the material goods that we have, whether it be the status that we have. Everything belongs to Hashem and comes from Hashem. Okay, I wish you all a wonderful evening.